The next step on the ladder is that we're going to move from the first line personality theme and we're going to move to the second line. Now, the first thing about the second line is that the second line, if you look at it, it's in the middle of the lower trigram. So if you imagine that the first line is the foundation of the house, then what the second line represents is the windows that look out on the main floor. And everything about the second line is about this position that it has. That is, all second lines are naked people walking around in their houses with the lights on, and there's a parade going by outside. And everybody in that parade is looking in and saying, gee, they could do this, they could be this, they could be that. In other words, if you have a second line in your profile, the first thing to understand about that is that everybody is looking in your window and they're all trying to figure out what's best for you, what will work for you, where you should go, what you should be, what you should do, when you should do it, how you should do it. And as a result of that, second line people say, leave me alone. Not only leave me alone, but they don't even realize that they're naked walking around in the room with the light on and that everybody is looking in. Just plain leave me alone. The first line and second line in the structure of the hexagram, the first line is fundamentally yin, the second line is fundamentally yang. That is in its basic nature. So first line themes are all rooted in introspection, regardless of the subtleties of the changes in the unconscious. In other words, the first line personality, it is deeply involved with trying to find out how things work and get to the basis of them. The second line couldn't care less. The second line says, I don't know why it works, and I don't know how it works, but I'm doing great. Leave me alone. And of course, one of the dilemmas about the second line, you see the second line, you look in their window, and they're doing something really incredible, and you look inside of there and you say, wow, I wish I could learn that. I wish they could teach me that. And you knock on their door, and they say, leave me alone. And you say, but you do that thing, and you would be really great doing this thing out in the world. And they look at you and they think you're really nuts. They think, yeah, but I don't know how I do what I do. I mean, there are people, I have had this experience, I had this in my first days with computers. There was always somebody who was telling me how they could show me how to do things on the computer. And after 10 minutes with them, I wanted to strangle them because they didn't know how to teach. Just because you know how to do things doesn't mean you know how to teach them. And they're the most frustrating people on earth. Now, the second line knows that about themselves. They're naturals. They're naturals. They do what they do because it's what they do. They don't know why they do it or how they do it. And they could be incredible at what they do. And, of course, you've got all these people on the outside saying, geez, you've got so much potential. You could be this and you could be that and everybody should see this and you should go out there and do that. And they're terrified. Now, the thing to recognize about the second line, and you'll see this in the harmony of the fifth line, that the byproduct of this is paranoia. I mean, these are paranoid people. They know after a while that people are looking in. They know that people are going to bother them. And they really do not want to be bothered because it means they have to do things and learn things and break their pattern. And I don't want to do that. However, if you have a second line profile child, they have to be educated. If you look at somebody's design, doesn't matter where you look, not just the profile, you look at all the second lines in your chart. And wherever you see that second line in your chart, that's where people are looking in on you and saying, aha, you're this or you're that. They're projecting on you. This is a line of projection. They say, you're this, you're that. Now, of course, this ends up being the great paper tiger line. They look inside of you, you've got the 7-2, and they say to you, wow, you could be a leader, you've got the role, you can be this or that. Yeah. But, the second line says, I'm a Democrat. I think the people should be responsible. Let them vote. I'm going to stay home. This is the essence of the second line. So they really need to be encouraged to study. It's something that's very important for them. All right. So when we start and we get to a second line personality, you've got the great leave me alone types, and the first thing to recognize about all second lines is they are basically hermits. Leave me alone. Let me be about my own business. Don't bother me. Now remember something else. We're still dealing with lower trigram. So these second line, they don't know there's anybody out there. They don't know there's a parade going by looking in their window. They don't know. They're not paying any attention to that whatsoever. They're absorbed in their thing. And there's something else. This is not the foundation. So what they are absorbed in, there's a point at which they can always get into trouble because they really don't know necessarily how it works. A lot of second line profiles are very bright people. They grasp a lot of things on the surface. But don't push for the deep button. Because if you push for the deep button, you can end up embarrassing them. The fact of the matter is they're not interested in studying. It's not a second line theme. It's something they have to be introduced to. And of course that will be according to the nature of their design. So the second line personality is something different. Very self-absorbed, very involved in its own process, basically antisocial, would like to be left alone. We've had a jump now from the personality 1 to the personality 2. But at the unconscious level, it stayed the same. In other words, we've gone from the changing cross, the 1-4, and we've gone now into the foundation cross of the second hexagram, and here we have the 2-4. So we have a new personality structure, but we have the same previous unconscious. Here we're dealing with that opportunistic abdicator underneath. All right. So we come to the beginning of this and we come to the behavioral identity. The hermit. And the hermit at the unconscious level is the opportunist. This is the hermit opportunist. You can always label these profiles through the behavioral identity words, those keynotes. So the 1-3 is the investigating martyr, and the 1-4 is the investigating opportunist. Now we have the hermit opportunist. Now they can be incredibly impressive beings. There's nothing like them. They can also be the most annoying people on earth. These are born-again Christians. These are people that give up tobacco. These are people that can be absolutely incredibly offensive. This is the missionary profile. So what happens to them is they're a second line and they get called out. Whatever it is, they've been smoking all of their lives and somebody finally gets to them and says to them, you don't have to be a smoker and it's killing you and blah, blah, blah. When they quit, they don't quit and stay a hermit. When they quit, they get their crusade going. They climb up onto their fourth line horse and off they go. Nobody should smoke. The whole world should be free of this. You're all sick and crazy. These are people that when they convert, they really convert. That's why they don't want to be bothered. Understand their dilemma. Because if you get to them, if you really call them out, then they have to go out there with their fourth line and crusade for it. Now the second line, when it comes to mysticism or it comes to spirituality, it's out of the second line that we have those amongst us that are called. You only get called if you carry a second line. So you can have somebody who is an incredible nihilistic atheist, and the forces come and batter on their second line door, and out they go with their fourth line sign, and they start playing their missionary game in the world. They can be very powerful beings. They're a funny type. It's not like all of them get to do that. This is it's what's there in them, is this potential within them to actually be called out, and in finally being called out, be able to go out there and use their externalizing gifts to be able to bring that to others. When we get to the next theme, we get to the projected attitude, and the projected attitude here is the Democrat. This is the democratic abdicator. Now, 2/4s don't vote. I mean, they don't vote. They say, well, why bother? Leave me alone. You vote. I'll go along with it. It's okay. After all, they don't want to be bothered with trying to figure out which candidates present the best platforms and so forth and so on. It doesn't make any difference to them. And if it doesn't really call them, they're always ready to abdicate and let somebody else carry the load. That's them. They're very democratic. We really need you. No, you don't need me. This is their movie. Nah, you don't need me. Leave me alone. It's okay. Abdication. Abdication is a term generally applied to monarchs when they leave the throne voluntarily. They step down according to the pressure of the will of the people. And the 2/4s is really the great abdicator. They will constantly step down until they step up. That's their whole thing. Unless they get the call. And they have to get the right call. Now, there are many ways of looking at that. I have a book that'll come out next year, and it's all about looking at type and profile. And there is an indexing so that you can see all the types with each of the 12 profiles. And of course, when you're dealing with a generator, if you've got a generator that's a 2/4, that's really a blessing. It's a great profile for a generator, to be called out and be called out to externalize. In other words, there's going to be a difference in the way in which you can get to a 2/4 depending on their type. You're going to have to invite the projector 2/4 and so forth and so on. But it's very important to see that unless they're called, they don't go out there and do their job. They will just constantly abdicate. And these are children that abdicate all the time. Why don't you go out and play with your friends? No, I don't want to. They can end up being very antisocial. They can end up not being able to develop the right skills. Yet at the same time, they have this fourth line unconscious that keeps on bringing people to their door. Can Johnny come out to play? And Johnny's in his room, and it's his mother that has to do the whole, well, I'll go check with Johnny. And then she's in there saying, they're here, and why don't you go out and play? And do I really have to? This is classic of the 2/4. They're in demand. It's why there's this paranoia in them. Because they're in demand. Other people are always looking at them and saying, gee, you could do this, and you could do this, and you could be this, and you could be that, and I'd love to be with you, and blah, blah, blah. And as long as it doesn't resonate in them, then they're just going to ignore all of that, and they're just going to push all of that away. The limited perspective, bigotry, one of those lines that people get really disturbed with when they have it. You have the 13-2, you're a bigot. And everybody goes real nervous. Think about what that's like. The 13th gate, the fellowship of man. This is the gate of the listener. Anybody that carries the 13th gate in their design is always getting other people crying on their shoulder and telling them their life story and, giving them all of their stuff. Now, if you're a second line and you don't know that there's anybody out there who really wants to do that with you, but they're coming all the time, and they're constantly telling you stuff. They're knocking on your door, and they're telling you all their stuff. You end up getting very, very uncomfortable with people generally. This is where the bigotry comes from. It is the assumption that none of these people can ever really be of value, that they're just disturbing, and you would really like them just to leave you alone. It ends up being very, very selective. It can be so selective that there's nobody there. Because they really, if you don't have something that is going to turn them on, you're not going to get them to be involved. And they get very, very upset with all of these people that keep on coming to them and expect them to be this or that or the other. And, it doesn't stop in their lives. You go into the nursing home and they're 92 years old and there's somebody going to the 2-4 saying, you could really do shuffleboard. Can drive them mad. Leave me alone, I want to die in peace. The aspire to role is harmony, but it's a joke. Hey, look at the unconscious. Harmony through aloneness. Isn't that wonderful? I love these people. I think that's really a delight, This is where they find harmony, being left alone. For them, that's delicious. They're ready to abdicate from their relationships. They're ready to abdicate from their friendships. They're ready to abdicate from their daily duties because they really feel wonderful when they're just left alone. It's one of the things about them, why they can be such a powerful force, because if you can ever really get to them, they bring this wave of power with them, because to mobilize these creatures is really something. And once they get mobilized, they are unstoppable. They just build up momentum. They go plowing through. But harmony and aloneness. Remember that the fourth line is an opportunist. And because it's an opportunist, for the 2-4 profile, those opportunities are going to come more than any other profile. No profile gets more attention than the 2-4. It gets an enormous amount of attention. It gets attention unconsciously from all those people that want to connect to it and be friends with it. It gets all the attention from all the people that project on it and think that it could be this or that or the other thing, and they're always trying to encourage them, take this course, do this thing, have this, go there, and they're like a pinball, they're bouncing around off of all of that. And if they don't get totally fatigued, because after all, that's the fourth line unconscious theme, you combine the bigot and fatigue and you say, all these people are driving me crazy. They may all have the best intentions, but they're driving me crazy. All of you leave me alone now. Now, of course, that whole structure is there so that out of one of those forces that are doing that with them, that somebody actually rings their bell. That they really call them out, that the opportunity is really there, and then that's their opportunity for flowering. After all, they're not meant to stay a hermit forever. They're not. It's a part of what keeps them sane and healthy. But after all, for them, it is a trial to have to learn something. It is a trial for them to have to explain what they already know that they can't explain. It's a trial. So in order for them to be involved at that level, to be an externalizing force, you really have to get to them. If you don't get to them early, childhood, much more difficult. Because then they simply get into that pattern of being called all the time and not paying much attention to it. Just seeing that it's just another of an endless series of, people trying to get them to be something. The other thing is the level of inadequacy that can build up in a person. If everybody is looking at you and seeing what you could be, you begin to wonder who you are. What's wrong with what I am? And what's wrong with me being here alone in my space, doing my thing and being in harmony? Just because I can, help you, heal you, teach you, protect you, doesn't mean that I have to leave here to do that, because to leave here to do that will take me away from my harmony. They've got their rights after all. So it has to be something that's really profound for them. Then they're willing to do that. Then they have this great missionary power where they can go out and be the ones who speak from being called out. Not all of us can speak that way. These are the redeemed ones. These are the St. Augustines. These are the profligates that become saints. These are the ones that really can have a tremendous transition in their life and be an enormous force in the world. But you really have to get to them. Otherwise they don't go. The bonding strategy. Here, when we come to the bonding strategy of the 2-4, we're coming to a very, can be, frustrating combination. Because what we're dealing with is that we're dealing with shyness, boldness as the strategic theme of the second line. Now, understand, we're talking about the 59th gate. The 59th gate is the gate of dispersion. It is our gate of our sexual strategies. And by sexual strategies, these are genetic strategies. It's why so many of us, it's why most human beings basically ask the same question. Why did I have children with that one? We don't know. That is, our genetics are demanding relationships that our personalities or our awareness may have difficulty in comprehending, because our genetic strategies are very, very different than the rest of us. So when you're dealing with the 59-2, and you're dealing with this line of shyness, this is not about being a shy person. Not only that, it's not about being shy sexually. These people are not shy sexually. That is, once you make love to them. But you have to get there. And to get there, they have genetically a barrier that sets up, that demands that you break down that barrier. Now we're dealing with a classic 2-4 here. Second line personality. If you want to be the lover of somebody who's the second line, you got to break down their barrier. In other words, you have to go after them, and you have to be insistent. And if you don't allow them to break down your barrier, this is not the right genetic material. In other words, it's just genetics. At the unconscious level, you've got the confidant or not. So you've got this theme of friendship before sexual intimacy can take place. In other words, a theme of friendship in order to be able to assess whether or not you can have a valued relationship with the other at an intimate level. So the theme of the 2-4 is that the ideal lover for them is a lover that's going to break down their barrier, not to make love to them, but to be their friend. To be their friend. And at the moment that the 2-4 has somebody who wants to be their friend and goes to the trouble of breaking down that barrier to get into that friendship, then out of that can come a very deep, a very profound intimacy at the sexual level. But it can only work for the 2-4 if it works out of that program. Otherwise, it doesn't work for them. So whenever you see the second line in a profile, you have to understand that this is a dynamic theme, that it's very important for these people, that they recognize that in order to have the right partner, that partner has to come and break down your barrier. We have this, one of the things that human design allows us, first of all, from the point of view of already being involved in relationships, it gives us an opportunity to understand our relationships and to be able to work successfully with them. In other words, to be able to see those things that are there and can never be changed. Because we're not here to change the other. We're here to honor the other as they honor us for what we are. And love is something that is not controlled. Love is just geometry. It is simply a meeting. So it's not about selection. It's not about choice. It is what happens to us. So at one level we have the understanding through this knowledge to be able to recognize our partner, to have our partner recognize who we are, and in that be able to accept each other. But more important than that, when we're dealing with children who are coming into sexual maturity, for them to understand through their profile what works for them, and not to be frustrated in not understanding what works for them, so that they can have healthy relationships from the beginning. It doesn't mean that, they have to be relationships for life. It just means they have to be healthy relationships from the beginning. That's two things. One is that you can't enter into a relationship correctly unless you enter according to your type. There is no other way to enter into a relationship properly. And the second thing is that according to your type, to be able to see its alignment to your profile, in order for you to be able to see how that intimacy works out as purpose in your life. The real dynamic intimacy for a 2-4 is always going to come from the other coming to them, breaking down their barrier. Now, if you know that is a strategy genetically, if you know that that is inviolable, you can't do anything about it, then you don't have to be frustrated. It leads to something that I spend a lot of time telling people about, and I keep on hoping that it will sink in deeper and deeper. It's about understanding what an aura is. We talk about auras. We realize that we get conditioned by others in this knowledge. But I want you to understand that your aura, and it's big, I put my hands out like this, twice as far, all the way around. It's a huge sphere of energy. That the moment that you step into somebody else's aura, you put your design in them. You have to understand that. You're a generator. A generator is here to respond. And yet you think that there's a part of you that says, yes, but I have to tell everybody. I have to let them know. Now, of course, at some level, that's true. That's true because you're afraid yourself that nobody will recognize that you're a generator. And it's not true. You see, the moment as a generator that you step into somebody's aura, if you shut your mouth, you don't say anything, you will force these people, force them to start the conversation. You will force them. Just your aura, it pulls them out of them. You know, you're a projector. You have to be invited. You think you have to tell everybody. You don't have to tell a damn soul. All you have to do is be in your aura, recognize that it has its own power. It will go into the other, and mechanically it will bring it out of that person. It just will. These auras are very powerful, and they have a mechanical connection. The moment you put your aura in somebody, they know, at a deep level, they know. There's very few people who take in my aura that don't realize that I'm an ego manifester. They feel it. I don't have to tell them. You know, you put your aura in somebody and you're going to get exactly what that aura deserves. So important to understand. So the moment that you're really being yourself and you're in your aura, you have to recognize that the moment that you're with somebody else, your aura does the talking. You know those old Yellow Pages commercials? You know, let your fingers do the talking. Let your aura do the talking. It does all the talking. It will tell them. You'll get exactly what is necessary for you. And you'll begin to see something. So much of how we deal with each other is taking place at mechanical levels, deep, deep below our perception level in the moment. There's all these profound connections that are taking place between us. Let them do their work. Let them do their work. Don't interfere. Don't worry. Just let them do their work, and you'll get what's correct for you. It just comes out. And from people who know nothing about it. As a matter of fact, it'll be more easy for you to get it than if you try to explain it to them. Because then you'll meet their natural resistance. Because the reality is that that's what our auras do. So if you're a 2-4 generator, you don't have to tell that person. You know, you look across the room and you see somebody that you'd really like to dance with. You don't have to tell them. You just have to wait. Let your aura do its work. It will do its work. And at the moment that they step into your aura, they know that they're going to have to pull you up off of that chair. They know that they're going to have to break down your barrier. And they know that they have to be friendly first. Because you're a 2-4. And all of that is going into them while they're standing there trying to yank you up to dance. And you don't have to do anything. And then they'll say to you, would you really like to dance? And you can go, uh-huh. And away you go. And then you say, see, that person saw I was a generator. It's so simple. And of course, it works the moment that you're clear within yourself, after all. You know, you can't be a half generator or a half manifester or a half projector or a half reflector. You know, you have to be what you are, and then you'll see that you will get exactly what is correct for you, which means it will be healthy for you. You know, the moment you enter into any kind of relationship correctly, doesn't mean it has to last long, doesn't mean it has to be wonderful, but it's correct. And correct relationships are the only things that really matter for us. So pay attention to this whole thing about understanding your aura. Don't just see, oh my goodness, I've got an open this or that, and they're putting that in me. Be very clear about what you're putting in them, and understand it has its job, it does its job, you get exactly what's correct for you. And finally, the security strategy. This is the nourisher depleter. This is very, very different. Now, one of the things that happens to 2-4s is that they have parents who shout, "Get a job." Leave me alone. Get a job. I'm busy. Leave me alone. Get a job. I'm not going to look after you anymore. So the nourisher-depleter phase of the 2-4. And this is one of the things that finally gets the 2-4 out the door. Is that they have to get to a point where, they have enough resources that they can nourish being left alone. This is the Howard Hughes mentality. If you make enough money, you don't even have to touch the world. You can be so alone that it's perfect. Eh? So they finally get to the point where they're going to have to be, the nourishing. They have an enormous capacity to nourish. Remember, I have fun with the 2-4s because it's an amusing profile to me. But at the same time, I know how much impact they have in the world. I mean, they have this tremendous impact. And they can be deeply nourishing forces because they're the ones who have been there. My name's John and I'm an alcoholic, I mean, they've been there. They go through this whole story with you. They've been there, they've done it, they jump out, they say, hey, blah, blah, blah. And they're the ones that can really nourish others and say, look, I did it, and I didn't want to do it. I wanted to be left alone. I didn't want to come out here. I didn't want to be this. But I'm here for you, and I can nourish you now. And they make a good living doing that, eh? I mean, that's the moment that in nourishing, they don't deplete anymore. They become the nourisher, they bring in the resources, they feel much better about themselves, but they can be tremendous depleters in that sense. They're the ones that, because they don't want to get involved with anything, they deplete in the sense that they can use up other people's resources. You got 3 children and one's a 2-4, the other 2 kids do all the chores. The 2-4 is just, I'm involved now, I'm busy, don't bother me. At the unconscious level, we have the benefactor dependent. So, this can be a very nourishing benefactor, or it can be a depleting dependent. And of course, that's why all 2-4s get this heavy motivation throughout their whole development. I mean, again, your aura does the talking. You have a 2-4 baby, and the first thing you say is, this one's going to cost me a fortune. This one's going to stay home until they're 60. I mean, we have to get them out the door and get them busy, and let's see where we can figure out what they're going to be good at so we can get them doing that soon so that we don't have to support that. These are 50-year-old children who are still calling home for money. I mean, they can be. So one of those things to understand about the 2-4 is that they need to have that call in their life in order to really be full and not end up being dependent. What happens is that you end up being, a sadhu, where everybody else has to fill your rice bowl so that you can be into your own thing and abdicate from the world. Well, yeah, there's some people that like to fill the rice bowls of sadhus. But in the West, we don't have a lot of that. So, we want our 2-4s to be involved. We want them to be out there fulfilling their potential and their expectation, our expectation of them. And everything is fine until they try to convert us to their new religion. And then we have our difficulties with them. However, you can see that there is a real transition between moving from the first line personality, which really wants to get to the bottom of everything and understand things, and this second line that is there to take the ride in life. Now, after all, they can be very, very successful at being hermits, and remember that they have this deep harmony through aloneness. I mean, if it wasn't everybody pointing their finger, they would really feel terrific by themselves, doing their thing, and not feeling that they have an obligation to serve society in a greater way. However, everybody's got to be involved. So we drag them out into the world to make sure that we don't have to support them. Now, the whole thing about that is that if you've got the 2-4 child, you really have to make sure that you find what turns them on and you encourage them. And then they can be very powerful forces in this life. We come at the last 7 minutes and 30 seconds of the sun in the second line, that is, the personality sun in the second line. Through most of that line, the sun is going to be there. We're going to have a design fourth, but the moment that we get to the last 7 minutes and 30 seconds of that sun in the second line, in the last 87%, that's the moment that the unconscious is going to shift, and it's going to become a fifth line unconscious theme.